They used my business cards as coasters during dinner. That's how little they thought of me. My dad even joked, "Nina, sweetheart, when you're done playing entrepreneur, let us know how it feels to file for unemployment." Everyone at the table burst out laughing, except me. I just clenched my jaw and forced a smile. They didn't know that I'd already shipped my first bulk order to Australia that very morning. Before we go deeper, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, especially if you believe in quiet victories and sweet revenge. My Uncle Jerry raised his glass. Here's to real jobs, not pipe dreams from your living room. My older brother Tyler leaned over, speaking just loud enough for everyone to hear. She still uses a chair with a broken leg at her desk. How's she gonna run a global company? My heartbeat pounded in my ears, but I didn't flinch, because what they didn't know was that my planners and journals had just been picked up by a boutique in Milan. And that email sitting in my drafts? It was from a major venture firm in San Francisco waiting for my signature to close $1 million investment round. But none of that mattered to them. They still saw me as the girl who quit her job at a fancy law firm at 28 to design custom stationery in her tiny Portland studio apartment. The same studio they all rolled their eyes about every Thanksgiving. "You should have just married someone rich, like normal women," Tyler added, smirking. Dad sipped his whiskey and nodded. "Some people just aren't made for the spotlight." Right then, my phone buzzed under the table. I glanced down discreetly. One single line lit up my screen. "Congratulations. Your brand just launched in 42 countries." I froze. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from the fire building inside me. I was finished being the family's running joke, but I didn't say a word, not yet. Because I had something bigger planned. A stage waiting for me the following weekend. A family event with plenty of cameras, guests, and a surprise no one would see coming. And when I spoke next, no one at that table would laugh again. The following Saturday, our entire extended family gathered at my cousin's engagement party. It was a fancy ballroom at the Portland Art Museum, decked out with fairy lights, champagne towers, and too many fake smiles to count. I walked in wearing the same emerald green dress they'd mocked the Christmas before, the one they'd called cheap and plain, but this time I wore it like armor. Aunt Lisa spotted me first. "Oh, look, Nina's here, still making your little notebooks," she called out with a condescending laugh, swirling her glass of rosé. Before I could even answer, Tyler jumped in. "She says it's international now," he laughed, rolling his eyes. The table roared with laughter, but I just smiled, because this time, I was holding the mic. Literally. A few minutes later, the host invited me to the stage, introducing me as the founder of a brand making waves around the world. I stepped up, cleared my throat, and said into the microphone, "I'd like to thank everyone who believed in me, and even those who didn't, because your doubts fueled every single step of my journey." The entire ballroom fell silent. No one laughed again. Maybe she meant she ships her failures globally. My cousin Eric smirked, his voice dripping sarcasm. But I kept my chin high, shoulders squared. Because I'd learned a long time ago, when you're holding a royal flush, you don't need to boast. You wait for the perfect moment to reveal your cards. I glanced across the ballroom, gave a subtle nod, and took a steady breath. That's when the event host stepped forward and grabbed the mic. "Before we continue, we have a special message from one of our very own guests, Miss Nina Collins." Heads turned. Champagne glasses froze mid-air. A few people shifted in their chairs. I stood up slowly, my emerald dress swishing around my ankles, and walked forward, each step echoing like thunder on the polished museum floor. Taking the mic, I scanned the sea of familiar faces, some curious, some clearly hoping I'd embarrass myself. "I know many of you still think of me as the girl running a hobby business out of her cramped studio apartment," I began, letting my voice carry. But I figured tonight was the perfect time to share a few numbers. Behind me, the giant projector screen flickered to life. Global presence, 42 countries. Last quarter revenue, $4,800,000, 0 cents. Partnerships, Vogue, Amazon, Target. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Forks clattered against plates. Uncle Jerry spilled his bourbon down the front of his shirt. Dad's face went pale. And Tyler? His jaw dropped so wide I half expected it to hit the floor. I smiled gently. Turns out, that pipe dream pays better than all your corporate jobs combined. But I wasn't finished. I clicked to the next slide. Headlines blazed across the screen. Featured in Forbes, the studio girl who disrupted stationery. The silence was deafening. For the first time in years, no one shot back a snide comment. They just sat there, stunned. But just as I turned to leave the stage, Eric shot to his feet, his voice ringing out. Wait. If you're supposedly that rich, why'd you borrow money from Grandma last year? I paused mid-step, turned back to face him, and gave a soft smile. That was a test, I said calmly, and Grandma passed. I let that sink in for half a beat before adding, but you failed because that money came back to her tenfold, through shares in my company. All eyes in the room shifted toward Grandma, who winked at me and raised her glass of sparkling cider. The same relatives who'd mocked me were now standing under twinkling lights, surrounded by floral arrangements and champagne towers, all courtesy of the very brand they used to ridicule. After the event, everything changed, but not quite the way you'd expect. No one apologized. No one said we were wrong. Instead, they adapted. Suddenly everyone wanted a piece of my story. Uncle Jerry emailed me his consulting resume offering to help me scale operations. Tyler sent me a text that said, "Hey sis, maybe we should collab sometime. I know a few influencer friends." Funny how quickly they forget their laughter when they realize you're the one signing the checks. Even Dad grilled steaks the next evening, acting like he'd never rolled his eyes at my little hobby. But I wasn't interested in pretending everything was fine. I hadn't forgotten the bourbon-soaked insults, the mocking laughter, or how they once dismissed my planner business as nothing more than arts and crafts for bored housewives. I smiled at them all, calmly, polite, like a CEO dealing with amateurs. Then came the dinner at home, a private gathering with just my immediate family. Mom poured wine and set the table while Dad cleared his throat trying to look casual. "Nina," he said finally, "we've been talking, and we think it's time you let us help manage things. We're your family after all." "Help?" I set my fork down slowly and leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "Dad, you once told me I was wasting my life. You told me to sell my printer and get a real job, and now you want in?" He shifted in his seat. "Well, that was before we knew how serious you were." I let out a soft laugh. "No, Dad, it was before you knew how successful I was." Then I reached for the folder I'd brought with me. Inside were documents, not for partnerships, not for investments, but for the removal of names, their names. From my company trust. "I've decided," I said, keeping my voice calm, "to restructure everything. The shares I promised when I started, they're being voided, effective immediately." Mom's fork clattered onto her plate. Tyler's voice shot up. "You can't just cut us out like that." "Oh, I can," I stood folding the folder shut, "because when I begged for help, you laughed. When I worked through tears, you ignored me. And now that I've built something, you want to collect the reward?" Dad tried to cut in. "But we're your blood." I looked at him, my voice as cold as marble. "And yet you treated strangers with more respect than you ever gave me." I slid the folder across the table. "This isn't revenge, it's release." They just stared at me, stunned and speechless, as I turned and walked out. But what they didn't know was that the biggest revelation was still coming, and this time the entire country would be watching. 3 weeks later, I stood in front of a towering glass building in downtown Manhattan. 32 stories of steel and light. My company's brand new global headquarters. Reporters crowded the sidewalk, cameras clicking in rapid bursts. Bright lights from news vans flashed in my eyes as a giant banner rippled across the building's facade. Aurora Collins Designs, the global brand that started in a Portland studio. Microphones were shoved toward my face as I stepped up to the podium, my emerald dress catching the early summer sun. The host leaned over, smiling. "Nina, your story has inspired millions. People can't believe you built all this from scratch. How does it feel to be the woman behind one of the world's fastest growing brands? I paused, scanning the crowd, and felt a grin tug at the corners of my mouth. It feels, I said, steady and proud, like I've only just begun. And if you've ever dreamed of turning quiet determination into global triumph, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because the next part of this story will prove that success isn't just built in boardrooms. It's built in courage. From a tiny studio apartment to a global brand. Nina, what message do you have for those who doubted you? I drew a slow breath, looked straight into the camera lens and said, never underestimate the quiet ones. We don't shout, we build, across cities, across countries, across the world. The crowd erupted in cheers. Online views skyrocketed. Hashtags like Studio Queen and Nina Wins blazed across social media within minutes. And back in Portland, my family sat in stunned silence, eyes glued to the live stream. But then came the real twist. During the broadcast, the anchor turned to me once more. Before we go, Nina has one last surprise announcement for everyone watching. If you're watching, I stepped forward, took the mic, and let the silence linger for a beat. Then I smiled. I'm officially launching a new initiative called the Underdog Fund, $10 million dedicated to supporting young entrepreneurs who've been laughed at, dismissed, or told they'd never make it. People in the studio burst into applause, but I held up a hand. I'm not done yet, I said, my voice firm. Behind me, a massive digital screen lit up, revealing a list of names, the first 10 recipients of the fund. Back in my family's living room, I knew they were leaning forward, expecting to see Tyler, Uncle Jerry, Dad, or Mom's names flashing across the screen. Instead, the names belonged to 10 young people from foster homes, single-parent households, and underprivileged neighborhoods. Kids I'd been quietly mentoring for over a year. People with pure talent, unstoppable drive, but no support system. I turned back to the camera and delivered the final blow. To everyone who once told me I should get a real job, thank you. You made me unstoppable. The entire studio roared with applause. Back home, Tyler stormed out of the living room. Mom buried her face in her hands. Dad sat frozen, staring blankly at the TV. And Grandma, she just smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling with pride. She'd known this day would come. As I stepped off the stage, my assistant hurried over and whispered, Nina, there's a line of investors waiting to meet you. But I just shook my head gently. Money wasn't what I was chasing anymore. I wanted to build a legacy, one that had nothing to do with the people who used to laugh at me, and everything to do with those who'd never been given a chance. And just when they thought they'd lost me for good, something even bigger was brewing. A final twist that would shake them to their core. 2 months passed in a blur. The world now knew my name. I was on the covers of magazines, invited to speak on podcasts, and featured on business panels coast to coast. Aurora Collins Designs had officially crossed $100 million, 0 cents in revenue. But behind all the flashing cameras and polished interviews, something deeply personal lingered. A part of me no one else saw. My mother had been calling. Not once, but every day for the past week. I never answered. I wasn't ready. Until one night, as rain drummed against my Manhattan hotel window, a single message arrived. A photo. But Grandma, in a hospital bed. My chest tightened. I didn't wait another second. I booked the first red-eye flight back to Portland that night. When I stepped into the hospital room, the antiseptic smell caught in my throat. Grandma looked so small beneath crisp white sheets, but when her eyes flickered open, she smiled weakly and whispered, I knew you'd come. She squeezed my hand, her skin papery and warm. You were always meant for something big, she murmured. I just wanted to see it happen before I go. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I held them back, staying strong for her. You made me believe when no one else did, I whispered. All of this, everything I've built, started because of you. She passed away 2 days later. Quietly, peacefully. At the funeral, the entire family showed up in stiff black suits and forced solemn expressions. Tyler kept adjusting his tie, eyes darting anywhere but mine. Mom wore dark sunglasses that couldn't quite hide the guilt in her eyes. Dad approached me after the service, his face lined and uncertain, holding a folded letter in his trembling hands. "This was from your grandmother," he said, voice low. "She wanted only you to open it." That night, I sat alone in Grandma's old armchair, the floral upholstery faded and comforting. I unfolded the letter, hands shaking as I read the words that changed everything. I knew they'd tried to take everything once you made it, so I made sure they couldn't. The house, the land, and my savings. They're all under your name now. But more than that, I've kept one last thing safe. Go to the attic. My pulse roared in my ears as I raced back to her house. I climbed the narrow, creaking stairs to the attic, dust swirling in golden shafts of moonlight. In the far corner sat a wooden chest she'd always told us never to touch. Inside, nestled among old quilts, was a black binder stuffed with photos and receipts, and a VHS tape labeled, "For Nina's Eyes Only." I dug out Grandma's old VCR, popped in the tape, and hit play. There she was, Grandma, years younger, speaking directly into the camera with startling clarity. "Nina, if you're watching this, then you've made it. I knew you would." She took a deep breath. "But there's something you deserve to know. The trust fund your father claimed never existed, the one he said was lost to taxes, it was never gone. He used it to start his second business, under Tyler's name." My breath caught in my chest. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every cruel joke at family dinners, all while my family had secretly built Tyler's digital marketing agency on money meant for me. But now, I had evidence, and a name powerful enough to expose them all. The next morning, I went public, a press release, a video statement, screenshots of the trust documents, my father's signatures, Tyler's forged ownership records. It exploded online in under 6 hours. Headlines screamed, "Family stole her inheritance, now she owns theirs." Business licenses were frozen, my father's reputation shattered. Tyler posted a tearful apology video, begging me to forgive him. But it was far too late. I bought their house, then leased it back to them for triple the market rate. When Dad called me, his voice breaking, I didn't shout. I simply said, "You taught me business, remember? I learned well," and hung up. Now I owned everything they once used to shame me. Yet I didn't feel bitter, I felt free. Because the girl they once mocked didn't just succeed, she became a legacy. If my story moved you, leave me a comment. I'd love your support and your thoughts. Tell me how you've faced doubt or risen above those who underestimated you. And remember, protect your dreams fiercely, even when no one else believes in them. Build in silence if you must, but never stop building. Subscribe to join me on this journey, and let's create legacies together, one bold step at a time.